Conference on Sustainable Aviation Fuels, the policy framework and market development in ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, for the morning, to continue and follow up with the morning session, this afternoon we'll be discussing other aspects from the perspective of market development. And I would like to invite Madam Shamin Tan from Boeing to facilitate the panel discussion for the second panel this afternoon. Madam Tan, over to you. Xin kính chào tất cả quý vị. Mọi người đã nghe thấy tiếng tôi rồi đúng không ạ? Vâng, tôi cũng rất là mừng được.
Thank you for staying with us for the second half of the day. In our upcoming second panel, I'll begin with a bit of a context setting to Vietnam's SAF potential, and then I'll invite my esteemed panelists on stage with me. Okay, so a bit of background. Boeing, we're an OEM, we manufacture aircrafts, and we've been in the space of doing SAF research in Vietnam for 3 consecutive years now. On a yearly basis, we've done, starting in 2024, work around first understanding the SAF feedstock availability across ASEAN and specifically Vietnam. And in the second year, we looked at the techno-economics of the SAF value chain in Vietnam. And in the third piece of work, which was launched recently on 23rd of January here in Hanoi, we published ASEAN SAF 2050 Outlook. And it's very exciting because through this series of 3 research work over the past 3 years, we've seen a consistent echoing message around the strong availability of rice waste and cassava waste in region. But I'll share a little bit more on our perspective on the viable feedstocks here in a bit. So without further ado, let's start with the big picture. So what we're seeing in Vietnam is that Vietnam is ranked one of the top 5 in ASEAN with the most feedstocks. And particularly the feedstocks that stood out was rice waste, which is the husk and the straws, as well as cassava waste in the agriculture sector. We're seeing a strong representation or aggregation of these feedstocks in the Red River and the Mekong Delta region. With cassava waste, I think many of you, especially locals, would know that in the biofuels road transport sector, it's a strong emphasis on using it for the E10 mandate here. So I think in terms of thinking about feedstock prioritization for Vietnam's use, it's important to keep in mind what are the other competing uses out there. And today we're seeing with rice waste, there's some usage going into biochar, I think animal feed as well, we heard. But there is not much clarity around what percentage of that is actually used, and that's what we hope to illuminate. Okay. This is a demand outlook projection. So what we've done is looking across the ASEAN region and mapping out the SAF policy announcement by the respective governments and translating it to the volumes of SAF required as we look out to 2030, 2040, and 2050. And specifically in Vietnam, what you see in the chart here, the bar in gray represents the domestic demand because Vietnam today has not yet announced a SAF target publicly, so that gray bar is fairly low at this point. But if we look at the supply capabilities of Vietnam, we're seeing that it's a very high green bar. You see that contrast there. Particularly if we were to tap on the existing rice waste and cassava waste, Vietnam has the potential to produce 1 million barrels per day of SAF by 2050. And in looking at the techno-economic study and the regional supply chain of ASEAN, we're seeing that Vietnam is also very uniquely positioned. I think early on our speakers have shared that the strong ports here in the maritime industry, it's also a strength. And we see Vietnam as the 3rd largest SAF surplus producer when we map the potential surplus in Vietnam and also, in the different ASEAN countries. There are very cost-effective routes to countries in the region that have an announced SAF target. That's South Korea, Japan with a 10% by 2030 target. So therein lies the potential, huge export potential. So in looking at Vietnam's strategic positioning, we spoke about the maritime advantage, the ports in the south like Hai Phong. There's a cost-effective production point to those countries with mandates. We also see a potential around regional collaboration. I think with Lao PDR just next door, which is a landlocked country, Vietnam can provide that access of feedstocks and becoming that central node for the ASEAN region. And last but not least, I think the study also looked at some ideas around, considering green corridors, green lanes. I think we've seen free trade agreements in a couple of the ASEAN countries, and that's also a potential point where we could harness on and synergize with the IMO. And in all these efforts of us driving SAF, what the real essence and meaning behind it is to be able to provide job creation and reduce emissions, and also be inclusive of equity, right? The females in the community as well, and inclusive of the farmers to ensure that they get their fair share of their keeps in being a part of this SAF value chain. When we look at the recommendations in terms of how we can start thinking about the policy implementation, we encourage the thinking of looking at different technology pathway. We know that today heifer is a strong focus with PVN and Petrolimex looking at used cooking oil conversion to SAF. That's a nearer term dependence on heifer, but we would strongly encourage longer term thinking on leveraging on alcohol to jet and Fischer-Tropsch pathways. And a field that Boeing works very actively on across ASEAN is also on policy advocacy, on policy harmonization, because we do hear, echoed by many of the panelists early on as well, that with a lot of the governments announcing their SAF policy today, it's important that there isn't a market distortion, that, the airlines are not disadvantaged if, or passengers when we fly. We don't want to be having to avoid some airports because of the extra charges through SAF. So that consistent and level playing field is important. So with that, I'd like to share, this is the report link, the one that was launched on 23rd January in Hanoi this year. It's available online. You can look it up, and I'm happy to share my contact if any of you would like to discuss any collaboration opportunities. Right? With that, I'd love to invite our esteemed panelists right at the end.
Vâng ạ, xin được cảm ơn bà.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shamantan, with the background that you set for this plenary, for this panel discussion. And I would like to invite Mr. Tan Song Hui from the SAFCO, Singapore, Mr. Wong Hong from APA, Ms. Sutari Kiatman from Thailand Ministry of Energy, and Mr. Nguyễn Thanh Sơn, Deputy Chief of the Material Management Division of Vietnam Airlines, to the stage for this panel discussion. So let's follow this panel discussion on the topic of role of industry in developing.
A very warm welcome to our esteemed panelists. Very excited to have all of you here with us today, and special thanks again to the organizers for having all of us. As I begin on this second panel, which is titled Industry Perspective in SAF Market Development and Implementation, I'd like to start by introducing each of our panelists, and we'll dive straight into the four themes today. So at the very first seat on your right, we have Mr. Nguyen Thanh Son. He is the supply director, deputy director for Vietnam Airlines. And Mr. Son brings with him 20 years of experience in Vietnam Airlines. And before taking on this role, he was formerly the general manager of the aircraft engineering division. And he had also led electrical and avionics team. And currently, Mr. Son leads the supply department in Vietnam Airlines with very rich experience in SAF procurement. And next to Mr. Son, we have with us Ms. Sutri Kietnan from Thailand, the Ministry of Energy and the Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency. Ms. Sutri is the head of biofuels. She brings with her 15 years of experience in Thailand energy sector. She is a scientist and an engineer in the biodiesel group. And she's also the senior professional engineer, which leads the technical studies and policy support initiative. And especially, she focuses on SAF and hydrogen for the transport sector. And we have also our very own Director General of the Association of APAC Airlines, Mr. Wong Hong. Congratulations on your new role. Such an honor to have you with us today. And Mr. Wong Hong brings with him 22 years of international aviation experience. He's held senior commercial roles in alliance, network planning, revenue management, and sales at Singapore Airlines and Delta Airlines. He was formerly Delta Airlines president for China. Wong Hong also brings extensive overseas experience, having based in China, India, Thailand, and Vietnam. And outside beyond aviation, he was also formerly the vice president with MasterCard International for Southeast Asia. And last but not least, very important, Ms. Tan Xiao Hui, who is our Chief Executive Officer of SAFCO, Singapore Sustainable Aviation Fuels Company. She's a seasoned global executive with over 2 decades of commercial and sustainability leadership experience, spanning energy, aviation, healthcare, and consumer goods sector. Prior to joining SAFCO, Ms. Tan held senior global positions in Shell, in Procter & Gamble, and in Citibank. And she's got a specialization in commercial strategy, market development, marketing for low carbon solutions, including SAF, carbon credits, carbon capture and storage, and hydrogen. Right? Wonderful. We can see that we have a panel of very rich expertise. And without further ado, I'd like to take us through the 4 key themes of the second panel today. So the panel today, the focus is on industry's perspective in SAF and market development and implementation. And in today's discussion, we'll cover these 4 themes. First would be on airline strategies and SAF adoption, commitments out there. The second is on operational aspects, the blending, logistics, and fuel supply integration. Thirdly, we'll look at market readiness and constraints from industry. And last but not least, we'll go into the economics and the physical consideration, the financing aspect. So beginning with the very first theme, if I may, the first theme will focus on how airlines are thinking about SAF in the context of their sustainability strategy and adoption commitments. And I have the first question for Mr. Son from Vietnam Airlines. We're curious to hear from you. How is Vietnam Airlines thinking about SAF in the context of your broader sustainability strategy and long-term decarbonization roadmap?
Thank you, Mr. Samin Tan, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, as the flag carrier of Vietnam with a fleet of more than 100 aircraft and expanding to double size in upcoming years, Vietnam Airlines always commit and pioneer in sustainability development, including SAF adaptation. So we believe that SAF as a primary decarbonization lever and allied with IATA, IATA, and ICAO net zero roadmap, the SAF is today widely recognized as the decarbonization method for the airlines, and which is can be used to about 65% of carbon deduction. And with that, Vietnam Airlines is always commit and support in using SAF. We already use SAF for the flight departing from Charles de Gaulle in 2022, and in 2025 we, the first Vietnamese airlines, use the SAF flying from Singapore to Vietnam, and continue in 2025 we have 5 domestic flights using SAF departing from Da Nang. And with that, we think that the main strategic challenge is not SAF feasible technical feature, but the economics and logistics of scaling it use across the Southeast Asia is the most, I think, key point, which is the SAF is price is 2 to 4 times is higher than the conventional jet fuel. One of the example we can say that starting from 2025, when EU refuel EU, they require to mandate 2% SAF, so we have to pay for the SAF fee is double than before for the flying from Europe, which is cost us about many millions per year for using SAF. And also we think that the second point is limited SAF availability remaining key driver for the high price and major barrier of adoption for the airlines. And the third one, we think that the globally harmonized accounting framework, also certification, also the key point, which is I think that for the today we see that the ISCC EU is not recognized by ISCC ICAO. Is somehow that for Vietnam Airlines we have to pay double. I mean that we have to pay for the SAF fee with the refuel EU ISCC, but then we cannot use the CO2 credit to claim for COSIA credit. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Son. I think it's very real pain points that you have raised from the airline's perspective, but it's also very encouraging to see that Vietnam Airlines has flown your first SAF test flight. You know, we do see that there's that confidence that, you know, we know that SAF can go into today's aircraft, right? Philip Goh shared early on in his presentation, you know, there's no change required to the fueling infrastructure. And, you know, as an OEM, both Boeing and Airbus, we're committed to delivering commercial aircraft that can cope with 100% SAF by 2030. But the challenge here is really with the price and the availability of SAF. I might turn the next question to Mr. Wong Hong. We hear that the APAC Airlines, as part of AAPA, has collectively committed to a 5% SAF by 2030 targets. We'd love to hear from you, you know, how are the APAC Airlines balancing their net zero commitments with the practical challenges of SAF availability and price?
Yeah, good afternoon. I hope most of you are awake, which would be very encouraging for us. Anyway, I want to share, I think, from the airline's perspective, because we will be the users, right, of this whole subject matter of SAF. We've been talking since 9 o'clock this morning. I think it's very important to establish, everybody knows the main problem behind it is the high price of what SAF is today, right? 2 to 4 times, 5 times, whatever you want to talk about it. But airlines, you know, for Asia and I think all around the world, are really committed and very committed to wanting to be a responsible industry, right? As an industry, it is a very important transportation means, right, to connect people all around the world. We all want that to happen. Otherwise, we cannot be here today, right? With all the people from different parts of the world having the chance to get and meet together. But to be able to sustain this thing, it's also got to be very viable, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But just to maybe answer Charmaine's question very, very quickly first, I think airlines have been very active. The last 12 to 18 months, airlines have taken, at least in my part of the world, in Asia Pacific, right, taking a serious approach, right, to demonstrating, right, that they are committed to this particular goal. How do we do that? I think you can see, for example, I mean, you heard from Vietnam Airlines, you know, already using SAF for flights coming out from Europe. That's also part of the mandate. We have voluntary SAF happening in many parts. Many airlines are already starting to do that. And there are also offtake agreements, right? Which means that, you know, they're already signing, airlines are signing contracts for SAF that's not even produced yet. Malaysian Airlines, example, just recently signed a partnership with Petronas. So next year onwards, they will be able to start using SAF, drop-in fuel SAF, right, for the next 5 years, at least minimum 5 years, for 230,000 tons. SQ also has some commitments and signed a couple of contracts for next year starting. So these are all clear signals in the right direction, right, to demonstrate that it is a serious business. The airlines want to commit, they want to use the SAF, but it's really, really expensive. And we can address, you know, find how to be, you know, address solutions like that. But beyond just saying, you know, offtake agreements, airlines are also, you know, trying to help in the process, all right? 10 years ago, we don't talk about this subject because all these things just happened in the last 5 to 10 years. But when you talk about investments, and in this, these are very expensive investments. What I saw last year, in fact, September, there was a commitment by the One World carriers, right? The Alliance of One World carriers, together with Singapore Airlines, combining to commit to put some money into a $150 million fund called Breakthrough Energies Fund. Some of you may not be familiar. It's backed by Bill Gates, actually. So they are seriously putting money behind to want to commit to put into research, into startup firms, to look for better solutions. I mean, this is all cutting-edge research that can hopefully produce some breakthrough. I mean, that's why maybe they call it Breakthrough Energy Fund, to try and find better solutions, maybe more reasonably priced solutions to give us, you know, a better future. So I think that hopefully signals, you know, to the industry and to the entire supply chain, all right, that airlines are really serious and they're making inroads and steps in trying to do this, not just today, but into the future also as well, to commit money and invest in research to be able to try and find good solutions. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. We're all here in it to push towards that breakthrough you mentioned. All right, maybe we'll switch gears from a policymaker lens. If I could ask Ms. Su Three, from your perspective, you know, what is the role of government policy in creating a stable demand signal for airlines?
Okay, thank you for having me today. For the role of the government, I think the government policy plays a role in reducing uncertainty and creating long-term confidence for both airlines and fuel producers, as mentioned of Mr. Wong Hong, as mentioned as before. In Thailand, we recognize that the SAF is clearly more expensive than conventional jet fuel. Therefore, policy must provide a clear and predictable pathway for market development. And Thailand has announced an initial SAF utilization target beginning in this year and is developing a long-term roadmap to gradually scale up SAF adoption in line with supply availability and market maturity. Nowadays, there's two main manufacturers, Bangchak and PTT. They provide more than 1 million liters per day of SAF, and Thailand has introduced a voluntary SAF blending target, 1% that, as you know, the CAAT Thailand encouraged Thai nation airlines side agreement to support SAF's utilization. How there will be supply SAFs in the proper airport, in the infrastructure. SAF supply service has already started at major international airports as Suvarnabhumi Airport and Don Mueang Airport. And next step we have to discuss for mandatory for airlines that fly from Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sutri. I think that clear policy signal from the government, it's important for airlines to build that confidence and that willingness to take that action, to be buying the SAF. Now, with that, I think that's we've covered the first theme. I might move on to our second theme, sort of moving gears from the airline strategy perspective to practical realities of getting SAF into the fueling infrastructure and systems. I'll have my next question for Mr. Sun to hear from his perspective. What are the key practical insights, requirements for SAF integration into existing procurement and fuel supply systems in Vietnam?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So we think that there are some practical requirements for the SAF integration into the existing procurement and fuel supply system in Vietnam. The first thing I think it must keep the drop-in requirement, meaning that the SAF produced can be used without any modification to the aircraft system like we have today, Airbus, Boeing, or even the ATR or others aircraft platform, as well as the airport fueling system and storage without any modification, and then it can be integration into the current system. The second point, I think, it's the logistic and infrastructure upgrade. Although we have the flight demonstration during SAF together with our subsidiary company Skypack and with Bình refinery company, but we think that to use the SAF we need to have a larger scale to invest in the fuel supply like Skypack or even petrolimic aviation should invest on the storage and blending system at least at the hub, airport hub in Vietnam like Nội Bài, Tân Sơn Nhất or Long Thành Airport. Yeah. The third one is I already mentioned, but it's the traceability and certification. We need to have the certification widely recognized and harmonized among the system. I mean, currently we see that the Refuel EU and the ICAO requirements should be, I mean, from airline perspective, it should be harmonized and recognize each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stan. I think what we hear is that there's work around the logistics and infrastructure improvements required in Vietnam, and particularly also as countries test, trial, the bringing in of the SAF into the current infrastructure and system. There needs to be a very clear chain of custody and controls there. I might, we've seen observations in Singapore where they had the 20 months pilot on testing to put in SAF into the Changi hydrant system. We've also seen in Indonesia, Pertamina more recently completed their trial as well. With what we have Xiao Hui with us, I think I'd love to hear from Xiao Hui, from your perspective. Singapore is really moving from planning into implementation with the 1% SAF levy starting in January 2027. So we'd love to hear from you, how complex, is the SAF integration into the existing fuel logistics system, and what are some of the changes that's needed to pay attention to quality control, certification, and traceability.
Thank you. Before I just start answering the question, so just want to say thanks to the distinguished organizer here for inviting SAFCO. A quick introduction about SAFCO because we are relatively new. SAFCO is the central procurement entity that has been set up by Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore. You heard from Christopher today, with the SAF policy, we are the entity that's set up to deliver the SAF policy. Of course, the major part of the SAF policy is to really collect the levy and then to procure the SAF in the most competitive and efficient manner. And last but not least, to also allocate the environmental attribute to some of the stakeholders. So before kind of illustrating too much about SAFCO, I'm happy to discuss this in some of the coffee break that we have. Just to answer your question, Shamin, I think Mr. Sun also have mentioned that I think physically SAF integration is it is more straightforward than actually many expect. I think what is challenging is actually the operational part. And I think the question is actually very appropriate because operationally, until it is done, I think a lot of people underestimate this process. They think that if you have SAF production, then the molecule will actually automatically flow into the aircraft. No, it doesn't. It's not that straightforward. So SAF is like what a lot of you would have known, that is a drop-in fuel. So once blended to ASTM specification, it behaves identically to a conventional jet fuel. It flows seamlessly through the current existing aviation fuel supply chain from production, blending, transport, airport fuel farm, hydrant system, and also finally into the aircraft. So this is a very critical advantage because it allows us to decarbonize aviation today, right, as we speak, with current fleet, current infrastructure, without waiting for the next generation aircraft or even an entirely new fueling system. So the complexity lies above the physical flow. It lies with what I call the assurance layer. So first, quality assurance. SAF must meet ASTM D7566 specification, and once blended, it needs to be recertified as Jet A1 under D1655. So at every transfer point, whether it's refinery, terminal, airport, stringent documentation such as certification of analysis and refinery certificate of quantity must be maintained. It is a zero defect system because aviation fuel is safety critical. We can't afford to lose that assurance on safety. Second is really the new kid in town for a lot of players, which is the sustainability certification. That sits separately from fuel quality. Each batch of SAF must carry a proof of feedstock origin. It is a very complex process. It has to consist of life cycle emission analysis, chain of custody, and it has to be aligned with recognized framework like what Mr. Sun has mentioned, whether is it Rate 3, Refuel, or CORSIA, or even some of the voluntary scheme that's out there today. Without this, the fuel or SAF does not have any decarbonization value. And that is actually critical for whether it's an airline who actually spend a lot of money buying it or corporates who invest in it. I think this is a very critical piece of the operational challenge. Third, like you say, coming out from those two is really the traceability and accounting. While the physical fuel is commingled in current infrastructure, the environmental benefit is not, right? It has to be captured. It has to have a credible chain of custody system, capability. Is it in the form of registry or robust tracking to make sure that the environmental attribute is actually rightfully allocated to the right stakeholders. And this is a bit of a new knowledge and expertise. And not everyone is very familiar with that. And this space also is evolving. And we need to learn with the evolution that's happening in that front and how do actually every country, every jurisdiction are doing the same thing. So in practice, SAF integration is not fundamentally just a fuel challenge. It's a system, it's a documentation, it is an integrity challenge across the entire supply chain. And I think that's where you look at policy implementation. You can't just look at the fuel side. Because the fuel side, a lot of the infrastructure is in place, but it's the operational side on sustainability certification, on traceability, that needs to be done. I think Mr. Sun kind of beladen that quite a bit in his experience from a Vietnam airline standpoint, and this is precisely what SAFCO is actually focusing, because we are doing it at a national level, and therefore building a robust, transparent, and audit-ready operating model that is at the national level, that's scalable, is actually very critical for implementation.
Absolutely. Xiaohui, I think very detailed thought process there. We can see that it's clearly not a simple one to figure out the entire chain of custody, but that emphasis on that transparency and credibility is top of mind. I think as you spoke about, quite a few stakeholders here, right? Fuel suppliers, the airports, the infrastructure. We'd love to hear from you, what are some of the most important bottlenecks that you're seeing today that, really needs to be addressed?
Thanks so much for the question. I think it's a natural question that comes from the first question that I've just addressed. I think to scale SAF, I think just to also echo a lot of the speakers' perspective here, I think every player in the ecosystem has a role to play. And they have to move beyond the current fueling handling capability that they have today towards data, assurance, and system level integration. If you look at the fuel producer, if you look at, of course, the pure SAF producer versus a traditional fuel producer that now moving into SAF production, they have to actually learn how to deliver a certified SAF with full transparency. Whether is it the fact that sourcing of feedstock, that the assurance that the feedstocks come with credibility, the carbon intensity reduction, compliance with scheme like the voluntary scheme that ISCC has, or is it CORSIA or Refuel. This is no easy landscape to navigate. This is something that needs to be built from scratch. Not every player have those kind of capability in-house. How do you build those expertise? How do you build those capability? Airport and fuel farms operator actually, like a lot of you would have known, will have to enable blending, storage, and quality testing within the shared infrastructure today with the conventional jet. How do they do that? While maintaining the system integrity, because they still need to run the current operation today. But at the same time, they need to build new capability. Logistic infrastructure player, that means logistic infrastructure player that service the airport today. They must ensure that they are able to do batch tracking. They need to be able to do metering accuracy. They need to be able to do mass balancing reconciliation across the supply chain. This is not something that can be learned overnight. These are capability that need to be built as we built up the entire SAF supply chain for SAF. So if I look at the key constraint or more potential bottleneck that have Asia Pacific start looking at scaling SAF, has policy start going into implementation phase, they are quite structural, right? I think there are a few major bottlenecks. I think one is, there are growing SAF production in this part of the world. I think we are one of the regions with the richest feedstock, and we have a lot of option on feedstock, a lot of option on production, but it's still small compared to the jet fuel world. We consistently innovate to really drive that supply front. At the same time, we need to really consciously looking at feedstock diversity to enable sustainable feedstock availability. Second thing is about uneven infrastructure readiness. Not all airports in every market in Asia is equipped with capability like blending, tracking at scale. How do we enable that? Third would be the whole thing that Mr. Sun has actually touched upon is the fragmented certification framework. Double conformance between Refuel and also CORSIA is actually very critical for airlines, for end users of SAF, because having a fragmented certification framework is not helpful, whether is it for feedstock provider or for producer. And an immature traceability system. Today, there's a lot of development work that's happening on traceability of SAF, on environmental attribute. But this and space are still evolving. There's a lot of different registry, a lot of different chain of custody, definition, book and claim is still defined by very differently from different practices. How do we actually harmonize this entire landscape in order for us to scale? I think is very critical. I think the last but not least, I think everybody might be bored to death to hear this thing is about bankable demand signal. Bankable demand signal means investors need to see a clear demand signal, whether is it coming from policy or coming from the voluntary market that is multi-decade. We're not talking about 5 years, we're not talking about 10 years, they're talking about 20, 30 years. When they've spent multi-billion dollars on a single plant, they are not going to be looking to just get payout in the first 5 years. It's impossible to get payout in the first 10 years. So they're looking at demand signal that will come in the next 20 to 30 years. Who can guarantee that? Without that guarantee, no one is going to invest into a new plant. So I think ultimately scaling SAF in this region is actually less about inventing new technology. It's more about aligning standard infrastructure and clear demand across the value chain.
Excellent, thank you, Xiaohui. I think you've shared a lot, and I think, in terms of the call to action, I love to quote Ifan from CAM. He shared early on, right? It's about learning as you do it. I think it might seem daunting, like a lot at the start, but it's learning as you do it. And we have APSAC, SAFCO, everyone here is part of the community that is willing to journey along and share our learnings in this experience. We might hear from a Thai perspective, if Ms. Suthri can share from her lens, how is Thailand, the Energy Ministry working with your local stakeholders to ensure that SAF is safely and efficiently put into the fueling systems?
Thank you. A key advantage of SAFs today is certified SAFs is a drop-in fuel, meaning it can be blended with conventional fuel and used within existing infrastructure without modification to aircraft or infrastructure. Another one. Thailand approach is based on collaboration across the entire aviation fuel value chain. The Ministry of Energy through Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency, or DEDE, that's my department, and in collaboration with the Department of Energy Business, DOEB, works closely with the fuel suppliers, refinery operators, and aviation regulators to ensure the SAF deployment follows international standard and existing aviation fuel specification. And we are also strengthening coordination among stakeholders through the proposed National SAF Subcommittee, which aims to integrate policy, technical standards, sustainability requirements, and supply chain planning. This platform might help identify operational challenges early and ensure that infrastructure development, fuel supply, and market demand progress together. Thank you.
It's definitely a multi-ministry approach to ensure the safety and efficiency of this fuel entering into the system. So we'll move on to the third theme today, if we focus on the broader question of market readiness, whether the ecosystem is prepared to scale, and what constraints must be addressed. So in this third theme, we'll focus on what's needed to also build the confidence and create demand to address current constraints limiting SAF adoption. We have the next question from Mr. Sun. From your perspective, what practical coordination mechanisms or efforts would most help to bridge the gap between SAF supply and airline adoption?
Thank you. So I think that we need to solve the chicken and egg dilemma. That's the gap between supply and adoption is driven by economic gridlocks, and producer like the petrol company, they very hesitant to invest multi-million US dollar refinery without long-term agreement from airlines like Vietnam Airlines. But for us, the Vietnam Airlines, we also cannot sign those agreements due to high price premiums and with financial risk at this moment. So we need to have the coordination between two parties. Also it leads to the second point that we need to have the clear policy signal from government for the SAF mandate pathway in Vietnam, and also I mean consider the realistic and cost burden for the airline and pursuing during the mandate, and just come to the third point. I think we should establish a national SAF alliance or task force, including the Ministry of Construction and also the airlines, the fuel supplier, and other party to involve, and then we have the coordination to develop the SAF market and also supply in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stan. I think the importance of having a national SAF task force or working group that includes multiple ministries, because we recognize that SAF is not only an aviation or transportation effort. It has to include the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Science and Technology. You know, there are many, many important stakeholders to as enablers to make this work. We'd love to hear more from broader APAC Airlines perspective from Mr. Wong Hong. You know, we've heard a lot around how the sector faces uncertainty around cost, supply, and contracting. How would you assess the readiness of APAC Airlines sector to adopt SAF at scale, and what matters most today? Is it the cost, the supply availability, is it contracting risk, or policies clarity?
Actually, the answer is all. Because all aspects of this affect, at the end of the day, right, how this is going to happen. I just want to be very practical and share with everybody. We all talk about SAF, we talk about fuel, we talk about supplying it at the right thing, and we want to do the right thing for the world, for the environment. And airlines continue to want to serve our customers because, in fact, this region is still growing, right? Still growing very well. You just look at the fuel crisis, not the SAF fuel, the fossil fuel crisis that happened in the last 3 months. Just 3 months of problems. Already you can hear IATA's projection that airlines' profit will drop from 4% to 2%. Okay? We're talking about a very, very thin margin business, on average, right? Airlines business. 4% margin cannot support the kind of high cost, that SAF prices are today. So I think the first point really we need to answer, and let's be very practical and real, is it's just not economically viable for the airlines. I mean, at the end of the day, it is still dollars and cents, right? But we talk about the whole supply chain, right? From, the entire upstream, from feedstocks all the way to the producers, down to the infrastructure. And Xiao Hui talk about a lot of infrastructure challenge, certification, it's one problem after another. So to answer your question, Shami, I mean, airlines are happy to take, but it's got to make sense. If it's at a high price like today, the airlines will collapse, So we don't want that to happen because then there's no more travel. So I know this is a very complex problem and it requires many players to come through. So going back to SAF, let's talk about SAF as a solution. Production and feedstock is a problem also. Right? I hear from a lot of experts telling me, there's competition. Feedstocks are not just readily available, 100% given to airlines. No, there's competition, right? Biodiesel and so on. And Vietnam is talking about rice, right? Rice, bio, husk, and looking for good solutions and better solutions to supply enough so that at least it becomes viable. But when I talk about viability, airlines is one thing, of course, because I represent the airlines, but I also agree it is everybody along the supply chain, right, that needs to be, taken care of, all right? It means at least it's viable, it must make sense to all parties. So at the end of the day, it is a very complex issue. Readiness, yes, if the price is right today, we can take the fuel. But infrastructure is there, certification problem is there, feedstock scarcity, competition, and financing. Right? I think financing is also a big challenge, because investing in refineries to be able to produce the SAF that we need in the volumes that we need is not cheap. Right? I can completely understand that. So I think it requires the entire group of people, those who are in the entire supply chain, to play their part seriously and say, how do we work together to solve this problem? Otherwise, the next time we come here to Hanoi to have a meeting, it'll be 45 degrees, right? So I certainly hope we don't want and don't wish the world to become like that and to become just unbearable. But I think I better stop there. Thank you.
Yes. This point around the price always comes up, in every conversation. And I think, the only way for the price to come down is only when there's scale, enough volumes of SAF out there in the market. And how do we create that scale and that volume? I think we've seen, a great effort around Green Fuel Forward in the APAC region, where it's broadening and encouraging buyers from outside of just airlines, but other corporates from other industries with their Scope 3 offset requirements, to be thinking about buying SAF, because then that opens up the market to more buyers. So with more buyers, that's a stronger demand for wanting more SAF. I think Xiao.
Sorry, may I just add one more point? I think we are the ones providing a transportation service to the customer, to the traveler. So I think with the rising education and understanding of customers, a new generation of travelers, who I feel could be perhaps more responsible and willing to pay a little bit more, then that can also help, right? Somewhere along the entire chain, if customers and travelers are willing to pay some part of it, then that will help for sure. But today's price, I don't think so. So, the corporates and the travelers can be part of the solution as well. I just want to, just want to add that particular point. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. I think identifying those with better, less price sensitive, I would say, that price elasticity and the willingness to pay. We've seen some of the roadmaps where governments are thinking about introducing SAF to be purchased by other ministries. So, starting at a more government procurement level to sort of ignite that demand, to get the action going. Love to hear from Xiaohui's perspective. SAFCO has led a really good effort around voluntary SAF procurement. Yes, please tell us more.
Thank you. I think this is I would say the dual role that SAFCO is supposed to play. We are also tasked to really grow the voluntary demand for SAF in the Asia Pacific, or starting with Singapore as a market. I think this goes to the heart actually why SAFCO was established. I think all of you have heard that the SAF markets face a classic chicken and egg situation. All stars needs to be aligned in order for SAF to scale, right? The producer need more demand certainty to invest, buyer needs supply certainty to commit, and infrastructure provider needs everything, needs both, right? Singapore approach, and I think that's really, like I say, the SAFCO dual role is really to break that deadlock through the fact that we are going to be aggregating demand from the air hub, and we also have the institutional credibility. We have the government behind us, that we have the credibility, whether is it from the way that we are going to be operating, and also the way that we are able to go out and procure. So around the voluntary procurement program that was actually launched in the Changi Aviation Summit in February this year, we actually started this entire program even before we start the levy. We brought 9 organizations together across airlines, banks, corporates, under a program, a single framework. This is a deliberate, like Mr. Wong Hong has just mentioned, SAF is not just an airline issue. It is actually is increasingly tied to the corporate Scope 3 emission reduction needs from a business travel and air freight standpoint. So they do have a role to play. And I think that's where the scale could come on top of policy intervention. And what SAFCO is trying to achieve is to remove that friction from the ecosystem. So if you think you are, for example, corporates out there, you know nothing about SAF. Hardly airlines has actually put their brain or their mind around SAF. And you are a corporate who just know that I will buy a ticket and travel to a meeting. How would you actually find your way around actually procuring SAF, right? So SAFCO could remove that friction from that. So instead of each company building its own SAF procurement capability when that's not their bread and butter, buying SAF is not what they are supposed to do, they don't have their own fleet, they're not an airline, we actually can help them to do that, right? We could they don't need to go out and negotiate bilaterally, they don't need to navigate that very, very complex and technical certification and reporting capability. We centralize that into one central platform, SAFCO. We do it all for you. You don't need to think twice, just come and join us, right? We will do aggregated procurement. We'll verify the supplier. You don't need to do that. We bring the expert in who are going to really push the supplier for the most competitive price. We will provide transparent pricing. And we will basically manage the EA credibly and allocate to you so that you can do your reporting. We even provide education capability to help you do that. So, but most importantly, this is not just a conceptual pilot. This is something that we will scale. And this is important for the mandate that SAFCO has, right? So what we are doing, of course, with the trial is to really test the entire end-to-end ecosystem. We show the organization that has participated in the first program with us that how are we going to do procurement, how are we doing the tender. We were going to show how the physical SAF get delivered into Singapore, how it's being blended, how is it actually leveraging the existing airport infrastructure, how the EA is allocated, which registry is actually going to be used. Like I mentioned, there's a very fragmented registry landscape out there. We help them to navigate, how to actually leverage them, how to do sustainability reporting. The purpose is simple. We want to run the system, show it to the world that this is how it's being done, so that when we are fully operational ready, when the SAF levy come on board, more organizations can join us and the scale is going to be there. Right? Of course, the industry response so far has been very encouraging. What we are seeing is a lot of airlines realize that the regulatory is inevitable. COSIA mandate phase is coming in. A lot of corporates are also realizing they have a SBTI, which is Science-Based Target Initiative target they have actually signed up to. They have a Scope 3 emission, which is 85% of their emission. They have no idea how to reduce. If you are a management consultant today, 80% of your emission is actually from business travel, traveling to see your clients at different sites. How are you going to reduce that Scope 3 emission, right? So this is what they realize, that they have to do something about it. They also realize that the value of aggregation, SAFCO offers scale. And we are also a not-for-profit. We're not here to make money from anybody. We are transparent because we are backed by the Singapore government. And we have a credibility for suppliers that not any individual player can easily replicate. So I think what I want to highlight here is there's a structural advantage in Singapore model. It is not just policy dependent. It is also aimed to create scale through a voluntary demand market that is actually very critical for sustainable, scalable program. Right? The SAF levy creates a baseline demand, which provides the producer with long-term visibility that will improve pricing, which I think what airlines are looking for, right? And also supply stability and diversification, right? You need the resilience. You don't want to be dependent on one supplier that may close their plant tomorrow because of maintenance. You need a diversified supplier slate. Voluntary demand buyer that participate with SAFCO will benefit from the base load that SAF levy will be buying, and while at the same time, they could expand on top with the expanding demand pool. This creates a reinforcing cycle. What I described in, I don't know whether how it's translated in local term, but a market flywheel, right? It's a wheel that is a circle, right? And that is the broader signal that Singapore is trying to put out. So we are not just introducing a policy like I mentioned, we are building an integrated SAF market ecosystem that is sustainable, that is scalable, that is replicable. And that's where demand, supply, infrastructure, and environmental integrity are all aligned. When all the stars are aligned, that's when SAF market will scale. Of course, it's very hard to get all the star aligned, but we try. And we get it going, and we hope that we can share some of this learning with our fellow ASEAN stakeholders so that everybody could learn and we could scale together. Thank you.
Wonderful, Xiaohui. So I think what we're hearing is that with the SAFCO volunteering procurement approach, it's more than just airlines that's interested in buying SAF. We are talking about all the other industries out there with a net zero 2050 target. They too have an interest in buying SAF. And it's so important that there's clarity around how we account for the entire chain of custody for SAF, and to make sure that the buyer receives the EA, which is what Xiaohui mentioned, EA, which is the environmental attributes. They get to, then account for it in their sustainability reports in the organization. So in that sense, we close the loop. And in doing so, by leveraging on SAFCO's platform, they also de-risk because you're tapping into a larger pool of different SAF suppliers. And I think we always hear this term, there's strength in numbers, right? With more coming together collectively, you then create a much stronger demand signal, the ability to purchase SAF in larger volumes and hopefully at better prices. So as we talk about price, still on this thread, how can we improve the bankability of SAF projects? We've heard, 5 years, 3 years, it's way too short. The investors are looking at least 10 years. I would love to, have my next question for Mr. Wong Hong. What forms of physical support do you think would be most effective for airlines? And how can the public-private partnership help with de-risking early adoption, without placing the burden on the passengers or the airlines?
Thank you. First of all, I want to clarify that we're on the same side. We're all on the same boat. I'm not here to just complain about the price. I think we all want to find a common solution here, right, to try and solve this problem. And I think, of course, every player has a role to play, but I strongly believe the governments can and should lead the way. I think governments can signal a very strong message, right, to all players and all parties. And governments have the power to do that as well, right, to be able to do so. Whether it's incentives, whether it's tax credits, they are all just various forms of subsidies or helping out, right, to make sure that it is viable. Viable not to just one party, but viable to all parties, so that there's a sweet spot that, all players can still say, okay, it's worth doing it. It's worth to do so. But something has got to give, right? And I'm quite encouraged. I want to say something positive still. I mean, in this region, at least in the last 1 to 2 years, I think many governments, more than 12 countries as I count, more than 12 countries in Asia Pacific have some form of, plans, all right, and ideas on how to create this SAF supply and make it viable, all right? Now, I also know that in Europe, they also have led the way by pushing mandates out 1%, 2%, and so on and so forth. I just want to make my own comment. I think mandates is a little bit tricky because it's a double-edged sword, right? Because mandates are intended to drive a strong signal for demand. But if the supply side is very constrained, or supply side there's not a lot of choice, what might end up is, prices just get increased, you just jack up the price and just pass it on to the airlines. Why? Because the airlines have to buy, because it's a mandate. But that's not the behavior that we want. I think the signal for increased demand or strength of demand is to hope that there will be an increase in supply, so that there can be a viable option for all parties to play in this program. Moving on to public PPP, public-private partnerships, I think that's a good solution. Because from the government side, the public representation means, I'm willing to put some money, right, to support and commit. On the private side, there's also research going on, And the private side also signals some demand assurance. So all parties can work together with a common goal and saying, let's make this happen together. It's all players got to play their part, right, to make it happen. And I think a PPP can provide, a good segue, right, to get to a situation where at least it becomes viable in the long term for all players. Today it's not, right? Today it's not the case. So governments can play an instrumental role, actually very vital role to get this thing started, to get this thing going and produce some momentum so that it can go on. I know, for instance, it's outside here, but in Japan, they provide tax credits, right? As an example, per liter is 30 yen tax credit for the airline. And then, in fact, Japan is a good example of a PPP, actually. They have a council involving the ministry, of course, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Trade. They involve the airlines, right? Japan Airlines and All Nippon Airways. They also involve the refiners, right? So all players are part and parcel of this program, so that there is commitment to drive this and get to a environmentally conscious and environmentally sustainable and responsible outcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Wong Hong. I think, conscious we're almost at time, I might do a quick summary before last question for all our panelists. I think in the past hour, we've heard of very rich insights from all our esteemed panelists. I think at the start, we heard from Vietnam Airlines around how the price of SAF is really a concern, especially with the example of the EU refuel mandate at 2% SAF, that it's already causing millions of extra costs to the airlines. Wong Hong has shared, airlines' profit margins have dipped from 4% to 2% in light of what's happening in the Middle East. So the price of SAF remains a concern, but then the only way to bring down that price is with the scaling of the supply of SAF. And in order to scale that supply, we've seen a great example from SAFCO around creating voluntary demand signals by aggregating the interest of buyers of SAF beyond just airlines, but the wider corporate community. But it's so important that there's also a very clear and transparent, traceable chain of custody when it comes to the environmental attributes given to the rightful buyer of the SAF. We've also heard the importance of having a robust fuel infrastructure and a whole ecosystem that is ready to support that uplift of SAF at the airports. And in order to have that whole ecosystem approach, we've heard the call out of the need for a SAF task force. We've seen a couple of countries like Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, in ASEAN all have their respective SAF task force that it comprises of multiple ministries. And with the task force, a regular working group convening regularly, we do see that, that concept is able to be taken into pragmatic action level. And I think with that, it's a quick summary of the past 1 hour. And in closing, I'd love to have just one last question for all our panelists. If you could fast track one practical solution to turn SAF into reality, what would it be?
Okay, I'll start first. I think for SAFCO, I would say that if there's one thing that we want to really focus on for the next 12 months is really implementation. I think sometimes it looks good on paper until you do it, then you realize that it is not as easy as you think. And implementation is a critical focus for us for the next 12 months. What we do is not just, hopefully will be a template for Singapore on how to scale, but hopefully could be something that we could also share with the wider world. And I think for us, that's what we want to, if there's one thing that I wish that it will come true, will be a click of finger and the implementation is done.
Well, I complain too much about the price already, so I won't talk about price. I think the main thing is, I still believe, that collectively we can make this happen. But I urge all players to take this seriously, so that we can really make this a better place, a better world. I have strong belief, there are many different solutions. SAFCO, Singapore is one classic example, but in another country, we have different solutions. So I'm just saying that, stay true to the path, and I certainly look forward in the coming years that we can really find good solutions going forward. Thank you.
Okay, for me, I think the SAF development requirement a whole of ecosystem approach. Success depends on only government policy, but also on strong collaboration among the airline, fuel producer, airport, financial and regional partners. By working together across ASEAN, I think we can build a sustainable SAF market and support energy security, economic growth, and our shared commitment toward net zero aviation. Thank you.
Yeah, so as an allies, we always commit and willing to use SAP, and I believe that the collaboration is a strong collaboration amongst the government, fuel supply and allies, and finance support also is the good or the best way to bring the SAP in reality. Thank you.
Wonderful. We have a collaborative ASEAN together approach here, as Philip said in his opening remarks, right? You go alone, you go fast, but together we go further. So with that, I'd like to close this panel, and thank you so much for your generous insights.
Vâng ạ, xin được trân trọng cảm ơn các diễn giả của chúng ta đã vừa mang tới một phiên tọa đàm với rất nhiều những thông tin, những nội dung hữu ích. Và qua đây thì chúng ta có thể thấy rằng là vai trò của doanh nghiệp trong việc phát triển thị trường SAF, đó là doanh nghiệp không chỉ là chủ thể của thị trường mà còn đóng một vai trò rất là quan trọng trong việc thúc đẩy đổi mới sáng tạo và hiện thực hóa các mục tiêu phát triển bền vững của ngành hàng không. Kính thưa quý vị, và tiếp theo chương trình, hội thảo sẽ lắng nghe.
With our agenda, we will be listening to a presentation by Petrolimex Vietnam on the directions and implementation of SAF in Vietnam. We'd like to invite Mr. Lê Quang Huy, Technology and Energy Specialist from Petrolimex, with the presentations. Yep, the floor is for you, Mr. Huy. Xin kính chào tất cả các quý vị. Lời đầu tiên, thay mặt cho tập đoàn Petrol.
Say a big thank you to Ministry of Construction and also the Academy of Construction Strategy and Training for organizing such an informative seminar. It's in such a short time, they have managed to invite many respectable guests from international communities. It's such a big achievement. Thank you very much. I will be speaking in Vietnamese mainly because the audience is mostly Vietnamese. Xin kính thưa quý vị đại biểu, quý vị khách quý, tôi xin phép tự giới thiệu. Tôi là Lê Quang Huy, là chuyên gia về công nghệ và năng lượng của tập đoàn xăng dầu Việt Nam Petrolimex. Và hôm nay tôi rất vinh dự được đại diện tập đoàn để nói về cái quá trình phát triển nhiên liệu hàng không bền vững SAF tại Việt Nam, và cũng như giới thiệu một cái dự án rất quan trọng của tập đoàn chúng tôi là dự án nhà máy SAF đầu tiên tại Việt Nam. Bài thuyết trình của tôi sẽ có khoảng 25 slide, được chia làm 5 chương. Trong đó chương đầu tiên thì tôi sẽ nói về.
First of all, I will briefly introduce you to Petrolimex with some key statistics and our performance in 2025. Then I will talk about green transition very quickly because we've been discussing at length about green transition. Then I will talk about SAF and diving deeper into the technology aspects of it. And then I will talk to you about the first ever SAF project in Vietnam, Petrolimex and Petro Vietnam, as the two economic groups assigned by the government to develop two SAF facilities in Vietnam. So first of all, Petrolimex was set up in 1956, and we've been operating over the last more than 7 decades, providing energy and fuels for Vietnam's industries. We've been growing very well, and currently we operate in petroleum trading. We also provide petrochemical products, even though less than Petro Vietnam, but we are also a significant player. And we operate in insurance, construction, and commerce, transportation, liquefied gas. So these are the 6 areas of our business. When it comes to infrastructure and networks, Petrolimex is the largest group in Vietnam in providing petroleums and fuels. The total capacity is 2.2 million cubic meters, with the fleet of more than 5 fleet of tankers with of more than 500,000 deadweight tons and more than 1,000 tank trucks. And in 2025, we recorded a lot of business records. We are listed on the stock market, so all of this information is public. Our consolidated revenue is $11.8 billion. Our consolidated profit before tax is $140 million. Consolidated petroleum output is more than 17 million cubic meters, and we contributed more than $1.17 billion to the state budget. We are among top 3 largest enterprises in Vietnam and top 50 Forbes. And this is a picture of our latest headquarters in number 1 Kham Thien Street. Beautiful building. Now, I want to talk to you about green transition. And under the trend, the global trend, Vietnam has entered into a number of high-level commitments to the world, signifying the commitments of our party and government in green transition. And we all know that in 2021, the former Prime Minister committed at COP26 in Scotland. And in 2022, we also signed up to JETP commitment. And it is at the national front. And domestically, we issued Resolution 55, followed by Resolution 70 of the Politburo on National Energy Security. And as mentioned in the morning by the CAA, the Prime Minister issued Decision 8676 on green transition and carbon reduction in transportation industry, including all modes of transportation, roads, marine, and aviation. For roads and marine, we have E5 and E10 ethanol, which is not a new solution. In Brazil, in 1984, for example, they introduced E22. For maritime, for ocean, we have methanol, biofuel, which is not very common yet, however. And we've been talking about SAF for aviation since the morning. And as we have heard from other speakers from other countries, ASEAN countries and Asia Pacific, the demand is huge for ASEAN. And with that, we have huge opportunities to move from importing to domestic production. Now, I want to talk about SAF. It is a certified low-carbon jet fuel from waste oils, fats, and biomass. And it is a drop-in fuel. When I prepared these slides, so low carbon, it is not chemically, but the life cycle product of production, it is defined as low carbon. So when it comes to lower life cycle of CO2, SAF can help reduce the life cycle of CO2 up to 80%. And up to 50% of SAF is allowed to be mixed to the jet fuel. And under US standard D7566, there are 11 pathways for blending, but HEFA so far by far is the most common, and it is also the technology we are using in our factories, in our plants. SAF is a small but fast-growing market, and in this slide there are two charts. On the left-hand side, you see the output globally from 2022 to 2026, and you can see that the production of SAF globally has almost doubled on a yearly basis. The second chart is the global SAF production. In 2022, it accounted to a very small percentage. However, in 26, it's almost 1% already. So we see the growth pace very high, very fast. Judging by the columns here, only we delayed a little bit due to the war and conflict situations. On this slide, you see the international rulebook, which is binding. And it is great that today we have ICAO representative talking to us about the mandatory framework, COSIA, and Vietnam joins COSIA in 2026. ICAO is the international organization, while for UK and EU in 2025, UK mandated at least 2%, and by 2040, it should be 22%, and that is UK. And I quoted here an article from Tiền Phong newspaper reasoning why Vietnam had to pay like more than 100 trillion Vietnam dong with the European flights, and Mr. Sơn mentioned about that in his remarks. And this is Asia and ASEAN landscape. Today, we have our guest from ASEAN countries, and we've heard about the mandatory rules from Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore also issued mandates of 1%, Japan 10% by 2030, and so on. In Vietnam, we have an advantage of abundant feedstock, and the catfish output of Vietnam is the largest globally. We also have rice husk and byproducts from rice production. So this is a great abundant feedstock sources available in Vietnam. And we also see that there are peers which are already producing Neste, Ecoceres, Pertamina, and Bangchak. And these are the countries already producing SAF. And there are exporters of feedstock from Vietnam as well. So now I want to talk about Petrolimex Keppel Singapore SAF project, one of the first two projects in Vietnam. In 2025, Petrolimex and Keppel signed an MOU to implement a SAF plant in Vietnam. And after 1 year of looking into technology and feasibility study, towards the end of 2026, Petrolimex and Keppel signed an agreement to develop the first HEFA technology SAF plant in Vietnam. Petro Vietnam has also been assigned by the government to develop a second plant. So for Petrolimex and Keppel plants, the total capacity will be 300,000 tons per year, but it will be divided into two phases, 150,000 tons per year first. And then the total investments may be around $450 million US, more or less. The joint ventures consist of only two partners, Petrolimex and Keppel, and the technology is HEFA, and we expect to have the first production batch by 2030. So we talk about Petrolimex. For Keppel, our partner, the implementing entity will be Keppel Sustainable Solutions, who specialize in sustainable development solutions, and Keppel is committed to bring to the plant the partners who can sign up to offtake contracts, and they will also bring international financing. And so we have strong partners in these joint ventures. Now I want to talk a little bit about feedstock because it has been mentioned. Mr. Wong Hong said that feedstock is a challenge because how can we assure quality of feedstock? Production may be easy, but then procuring feedstock is more challenging. What kind of feedstock will you use? For us, the first one is fish fat because we have the largest supply of catfish in the world. The second type of feedstock is used cooking oil, UCO. So while it is available, purchasing it is not simple. And the third feedstock type here is tallow, animal fat. So these are the three main types of feedstock for SAF in Vietnam for our plant. This slide delves very deeply into technology, and I will briefly talk about HEFA. So this is a plant of 3 stages. So if we compare it to a refinery like Nghi Sơn or Dung Quat, the refinery technology HEFA is much simpler. So in the first step, we have the HDO reaction using feedstock like animal feed or fish fat. And then the second step is hydrocracking and isomerization. And then we move to fractional distillation. And the good thing about HEFA technology is that apart from SAF, beyond SAF, which it can produce, it can also produce or turn out renewable diesel and fuel gas and LPG and naphtha. So 80% can be SAF to be sold. However, if demand reduces, then the plant can reduce the output of SAF and increasing the other products that the plant can produce. So it allows the ongoing operations of the plants. Why it is important? Because all of these facilities, the reactors will have to run ongoingly at 300 degrees C. That's why it is very important to keep them running to save energy and producing the products, the outputs that are viable. So as I mentioned, technically we've got hydrogen, and it is important because it cannot be transported in long distance. Because for transportation, it needs to be liquefied and being brought down to minus 200 degrees C. And long-distance trucking isn't viable for hydrogen. That's why hydrogen will be produced at the plant, and there will be smaller reactors used at the plant for HEFA technology. And besides hydrogen, power at around 30 megawatts will be used, and also water of around 30 tons per hour. So this is the current location that we are assessing 3 possible sites in Vân Phong, Nhà Bè, and Kiên Lương. So they have their own pros and cons. Vân Phong and Nhà Bè, for example, they have available existing facilities or infrastructures, while Kiên Lương doesn't have the infrastructures. The site is very big, very large, spacious. So all these 3 sites have been included in the National Master Plan of the Ministry of Industry and Trade, which is publicly available online. So I've gone through 4 chapters of my report, and this is the final chapter on delivery, stakeholders, and policy. And we want to see close collaboration from all public parties and authorities. And Petrolimex and Keppel will deliver this project. We co-invest and co-finance and co-implement the project. The project will not be possible without the support from the government, provincial committees of the province that we will select to be the site for the plant. When it comes to technology, we are negotiating with the 4 global world's leading technology providers from US, Denmark, France, and Italy, and we will select one of them to provide us with HEFA technology. When it comes to feedstocks, we will select from the suppliers, from the willing suppliers, and also off-takers. We will work and negotiate with airlines and fuel suppliers, as well as financiers. So the timeline is like you see on the right-hand side. 2026 will be for foundations and set up of the joint venture, and then FEED and FID in 27, construction up to 29, and first batch of product in 2030. What are our potential buyers? So we have Petrolimex Aviation, a subsidiary of our group. So we provided SAF for the flight to Incheon, Korea, and in 26, Petrolimex Aviation also signed an MOU with Sun Fuguok Airways. And most importantly, Keppel. They brings all international partners to the project. On this slide, the second last, about policies and mechanisms. Our joint venture looks forward to receiving strong support from the government because SAF economics hinge on policies. Therefore, a coherent framework would de-risk Vietnam's first plant. And if we see the feedstock as Vietnam's resources, we are seeing the bleeding of these resources from Vietnam because currently the feedstock is being exported. That's why we need to protect domestic feedstock. Investment incentives is important and needed. Site and utilities support are important for us as well. And finally, a national SAF roadmap. So this is a final slide summarizing all the areas that I have described in my presentation. And I hope that I have provided you with useful information about the first SAF plants in Vietnam. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Lê Quang Huy, for the presentation. And now I would like to invite you to enjoy a 15-minute break. And then we will resume at 3:30 for the third panel discussion. Thank you. and also the last panel discussions, which will deal with SAF technology, feedstock, and supply chain. We would like to invite to the stage Ms. Helen Berger, Director of Sustainability and SAF Asia Pacific of Airbus, to be our facilitator, and our panelist, Mr. Satoshi Miyazaki, the Director of Corporate Planning of Tayo Oil, Mr. Andy So, Director of Procurement of SAFCO Singapore, Mr. Vinit Baski, Senior Director of Business Development of Lanzatech, and Mr. Hoàng Long, the Director of the Petroleum and Coal Department of MOIT, and also the representative of Bình Sơn Refinery. So the moderator and our panelists, Madam Helen Berger, Mr. Satoshi Miyazaki, Mr. Andaso, Mr. Vinit Bakshi, Mr. Đặng Hải Anh, and Mr. Đỗ Văn Thức, Director of Investment and Economic Affairs of Bình Sơn Refinery, Vietnam Refinery. Xin chào tất cả các quý vị. Tôi là Helen Berger. Tôi là Giám đốc phát triển bền vững và SAF tại khu vực châu Á-Thái Bình Dương của Airbus. Tôi nghĩ là mọi người đã thưởng thức cà phê Việt Nam rất nặng, rất ngon, nhưng cũng rất nặng để giúp chúng ta có thể tỉnh ngủ, để có thể theo dõi nốt phiên cuối cùng. Và hy vọng là với phiên tọa đàm cuối cùng này.
Just to set the scene before we start our discussion with our esteemed panelists, this morning there were lots of presentations highlighting the importance of sustainable aviation fuel for Vietnam. And I think that is the right way to set the message that sustainable aviation fuel is, of course, to help decarbonize the civil aviation, but it's more than that. It's really an economic opportunity for the countries that engage into sustainable aviation fuel production. And just to set a bit the figures, so this morning the GDP multiplier of 2 was mentioned. So it is really a growth opportunities that go beyond aviation. It really would impact other sectors in each and every country. And that links back to one of the points that was mentioned in the previous panel, the need for a cross-ministry approach and really a national roadmap and engagement across ministries. So for this afternoon panel, we'll focus on the production side of things, how to make it happen. Because once we have highlighted the opportunity, how do we make sure that it happens and it happens as fast as possible and in an economically viable way for all the stakeholders. So just to set the scene, why is it so important for Vietnam? So we ran a study with IRENA. IRENA is the UN Research Institute on Energy, Renewable Energy. And they estimate the potential of SAF production in ASEAN. And I don't know if you can't see the slide, but I'll give you the figures. There's over a potential in ASEAN of over 27 million tons of SAF. This is way beyond the actual needs of sustainable aviation fuel at 1 or 10%. So there's really an economic opportunity to produce sustainable aviation fuel for the rest of the world. This means we're not just talking about aviation decarbonization, we're talking about attracting foreign investment in country, we're talking about export opportunities, we're talking about social and economic development in rural areas. So it's a very broad topic. And the potential in Vietnam is over 4 million tons. And this morning, it was mentioned, the consumption is 2.8 million tons. So you can see how the potential exceed even 100% SAF. So a great opportunity for the country. Now, how do we produce SAF in Vietnam? What are the different feedstocks and pathways, and how do we make it happen quickly and again economically feasible? That's going to be the topic for today. The HEFA, so based on the project that was presented just before, based on used cooking oil or, so the potential in Vietnam goes across all different pathways on how to produce sustainable aviation fuel. So the first one, the project that was mentioned before, is based on a technology called HEFA, based on some kind of oil. And there is clearly a potential that we estimate at about 300,000 tons. And this is the most readily available SAF pathway across the world and also in Vietnam. But because the ambition is way beyond this 300,000 ton and it's beyond 2030, what do we have to look at? And then when we look at the feedstock in Vietnam, the next opportunity is really about the next technology, which are alcohol-to-jet or Fischer-Tropsch technologies. So today with the panel participants, I would like to investigate this and look at three aspects. First, the feedstock. What are their views based on their experience, their involvement in the Vietnamese ecosystem? How do we make the feedstock available to SAF projects? Then to look at the technology side of things. What are the technology and the supply chain readiness to make it happen? And last but not least, what are the enablers? How do we make it happen as quick as possible, but in an economically viable way for all the participants of the supply chain? So thank you very much for joining the panel today. The panelists have been introduced, so I'd like to give them more share of voice. And I'll start with the question on the feedstock. So beyond the figures, the question is how do we quickly and efficiently mobilize all types of feedstock in Vietnam? And I'd like to start with our guests from Petro Vietnam. From the perspective of a leading refining and petrochemical company in Vietnam, what are the key commercial considerations regarding the pricing, the availability, and the logistical accessibility of HEFA feedstock in Vietnam, such as used cooking oil and fish oil and animal fat?
Vâng,
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, and participants. BSR is a new name. In the past, the company's name was Bình Sơn Refinery, but now our new name is Vietnam Chemical Oil Refinery Corporation. So BSR was established in 2008, and we have a total of 18 years in our journey, providing 110 million tons of products, including jet fuels, as well as submarine and vessel fuels. So BSR is among the 10 companies who have achieved the Green Development Standards in 2025-2026. Our shares is among the top 30 highest performance shares in Vietnam, and we have contributed more than 1.1 trillion đồng for social security policies implementation in Vietnam. So we are strongly committed to national security, energy security, and better environmental welfare for our citizens. So it's some highlights information about BSR regarding the feedstock and thinking about this from a company perspective, we believe that feedstock supplies plays a critical role in, it's a critical determinant of success. So I think anyone who have a sustainable supply of feedstock have very high likelihood of success. So it's a critical success factor. And there are three important factors affecting the feedstock supplies in Vietnam. First, the costs, especially for HEFA technology. Main feedstock comes from the fish fats and use cooking oil as shared by Petrolimex speaker. In Vietnam, we haven't had a systematic or structured way for collecting those feedstock for domestic production, though we have seen the rising exports of those feedstock. In the world, we've seen a rising demand for this feedstock for renewable energy as well as SAF. So you see that the demand is rising globally. That's why any price fluctuation or volatility of feedstock could have implication for the success of SAF production, because feedstock may account for like 70 or 80% of the production cost under HEFA technology. And also the factor of availability. For example, fish or fish fats or UCO. Every year we had a total supply of about 100 to 200 million tons. And there are companies who are collecting this for export. So these may be available on the market, but we may not be able to buy it, to purchase it. So we, in developing a project in SAF, we need to develop a partnership, long-term partnership for the feedstock. We had some experience in this and some lessons learned in this. We built the feedstock supply for ethanol, but when we started the operation, the production, we could not maintain the continuity of supply of feedstock because the farmers, they sold this to the open market when prices increased. And that's why when we implement our SAF project, we pay a lot of attention to availability and continuity of sustainable feedstock supply. And also in Vietnam, for traceability or the ability to verify the quality or certification or alignment with COSIA and similar standards, we have to make sure we have strict control from the input to the output. And we also have some critical infrastructure bottlenecks. For example, the absence of a proper system for collecting, storing, and transporting the feedstock. And we are also thinking about having the production facility located closer to the source of feedstock supply. And we are
looking for different ways to lower the cost of production in order to turn our ambitions, SAF ambitions, into operations. And we are developing a blueprint for establishing a sustainable feedstock supply for us.
Xin cảm ơn.
Jessica for sharing. So indeed, HEFA is in itself a challenge, and this is critical for a country to maximize the use of such feedstock for SAF production. I want to turn to Mr. Bakshi because when we want to scale up SAF production, indeed feedstock availability, security, traceability, and price stability is critical. So when we look at the next generation of feedstock, from your perspective, what is the potential to support large-scale SAF production, especially if we look at the next generation pathway like ATJ or Fischer-Tropsch gasification?
First and foremost, thank you so much for having us over here. A special thanks to Ministry of Construction, to Center of Green Fuels, and also to APSAC for having us over here and sharing our views on the subject of much relevance today, and not only from sustainability point of view, but also from energy security point of view, like seeing what has happened in recent past in West Asia. And now coming to your questions, since morning, what I've been hearing about Vietnam is that compared to other Southeast Asian countries, which are very bullish on the HEFA pathway because they have large feedstock, either the UC or a palm oil. Vietnam is a different case, and exactly what I've analyzed about Vietnam, for the reason that they have a lot of agri-waste feedstock available, and in the reports which I read, it shows anywhere between 65 to 100 million tons of agri-waste, and majority of that being rice waste. Now that is something which we through LanzaTech, I represent LanzaTech and LanzaJet. So LanzaTech is a carbon recycling company wherein we recycle the waste carbon and convert it into ethanol first, and then since ethanol is a building block, so we can convert that into ethylene, into C2 derivatives, or into sustainable aviation fuel. And specifically why I mentioned this was because right now we are doing a project which is exactly what we are talking about now, wherein the rice straws and the bagasse are being converted to ethanol in first phase, and second phase will be converting that to SAF. So Vietnam has tremendous of that available. You have a lot of MSW available, right? And but going forward, I'm sure Vietnam is looking towards more urbanization, which means more of MSW. So we, in Japan, along with Sekisui, we have been demonstrating over the past 11 years that MSW to ethanol can be converted through our gas fermentation technology. And it's a unique technology because we take the use of synthetic biology. With the use of naturally existing microbes, we convert, we gasify first, MSW first, in the same way like we gasify bagasse and agri feedstock, and then we convert the syngas to ethanol. So that is next level of feedstock. But what I want to share with everyone over here is there's also a large untapped potential available within Vietnam, which surprisingly, barring one of the panelists, like no one even spoke about, and that's you have a large refining base available, right? You have a large, I think Duan Quoc refinery is 7 million, and you're going for expansion to 7.6, right? Then you have the Nigisong refinery, and expansions are planned. You also have steel mill gases available. So I think Vietnam is the 10th largest producer of steel in the world, and if I'm not wrong, the largest in this region, right? 35 to 40 million is the potential available. And what we have been doing globally, we have been converting the industrial off gases or the industrial waste gases into ethanol. And we are not saying that we can do that, because the proof of pudding is always in eating. We are actually doing this. We have plants today running in China. There are 4 plants, a mix of the steel plants and the ferroalloy plants, wherein we are taking those gases, the CO2 rich gases, and converting that to ethanol at a very low cost ethanol. And so you were exactly right when you said the price of SAF is actually 70% the cost of ethanol. But once you look at these industrial off gases, you can make ethanol at a very cheaper price, at a price of even 650 to 700 USD. Now, if that ethanol goes for making SAF, it's really competitive. And apart from that, it's not only that, we have a plant of ArcelorMittal in Belgium, which is up and running. Again, the steel gases are being converted. We have a plant based on refinery off gas, right? You have refineries, and every refinery or petrochemical complex, you have these off gases. So that can be taken, and through our innovative technology, that can be converted into ethanol. So this brings a tremendous source of ethanol. And last but not the least, you have a lot of power plants. Like I was reading around 45 to 50 gigawatts is the power produced, wherein the 50% is through a renewable pathway. And you also have a program of making green hydrogen close to 500 to 1 million by, 100 to 500 KTA by 2030. So this gives you access to a lot of green hydrogen. And then you have 50% of the capacity is actually on the thermal power plant. You have the CO2 gases available over there. And CO2 emission is something which the refineries also do. So you can combine that with hydrogen. And something similar we are doing in India for the largest power producers, which is NTPC. And in the first phase, we are converting the CO2 to ethanol. And in second phase, again, it's something an alternative of the PTL technology of a Fischer-Tropsch, but we are hands down more competitive. So the trick is simple. We take CO2 and hydrogen. We make ethanol in the first phase via gas fermentation, and in the second phase, its backend is same, alcohol to jet. So in short, what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of untapped feedstock for alcohol to jet to thrive in this country in the coming term.
Thank you very much, Vineet, for sharing. So we heard about the fantastic projects that are in the pipeline on HEFA. From Vineet, the potential to develop alcohol to jet in Vietnam. Now, I'd like to, this is about the potential, but just to make it down to earth, I would like to ask Miyazaki-san, because you have a project running in Okinawa, and if you could share from a down-to-earth experience feedback, what you see as the practical insights that you could share on the supply chain and the feedstock side of things.
Thank you. My name is Miyazaki from Taiyo Oil in Japan. Maybe not so many people know about Taiyo Oil. Japan has 4 oil companies, and Taiyo Oil is one of them. And we are now working on the feed stage of the E2J plant at Okinawa Island. And then other oil companies also have each own SAF project. 2 of them has a HEFA, 3 of them has A2J project. And then everywhere has the same situation, just waiting for the FID timing. Most of all already complete the feed stage and just waiting for the start construction. So Taiyo Oil has the same situation. I would like to say, I would like to contribute this session to share what kind of the reality headache we have, such as just before FID people. Let's say, of course, we had 2 options to choose the technology, HEFA and A2J 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, government asked us which technology you want to use. Then we answered E2J. Because of the HEFA project, the big oil refineries already decided to use the HEFA. And you can imagine Japanese food doesn't have so much oil. It's very healthy food. So we didn't expect so oily used cooking oil coming from the domestic market. Then it is one of the reasons seriously, but we just choose E2J. Then why we choose the Okinawa? Because Okinawa had a refinery. We already stopped refining, but at that time, 10 years back, we had a refinery, and then we keep the tankage and then bars and the pipelines. So that's why it's easier to approach the new technology into our Okinawa terminal. Then actually we have a two-way to approach the ethanol feedstock. We already gave up to aggregate the UCO, used cooking oil in Japan. So very big, strong competition already happening. And of course, the HEFA project need to be the stable quality used cooking oil first. So everybody compete to secure the good quality of the UCO first. And nobody want to challenge to be an unstable used cooking oil right now. So we are now lesson learned about this situation. So we have a two approach to secure the ethanol from import and domestic. Then now, Japanese government gives the support to the new technology to produce ethanol as feedstock. But at the same time, we are now focusing on the import ethanol because how do we quickly judge to our FID? So we cannot wait for the new technology to produce ethanol anymore. So that's why we are now planning to import from Brazil and the US, big producers. But of course, everybody know we have to import the ethanol from other side of the earth and come to Asia in Japan. It takes 50 days or 60 days. And then we got some unexpected situation. Theoretically, we can manage to import the large scale of the tanker to import the ethanol. But thinking about the 50 days voyage, if we got some trouble in the SAF plant, we cannot stop their cargo. So if we really want to stop importing, but already two of the vessels on the sea, and then approaching to the Japan, and then probably, we also have a contractor cargo just before sailing out from the Brazil or US. So we have to manage about the storage capacity at our SAF plant, more than expected. But we decided to expand our tankage for the ethanol purpose. Of course, we wanted to minimize our capex cost to make a feasibility, a higher feasibility for our FID, but it's not easy to manage to import the ethanol constantly. So now we are planning to import large scale of the ethanol once a month. So it means we have to secure the ethanol 3 months ahead, thinking about the distance. So I can say we should secure the ethanol by existing supply chain basis first to make a feasibility. And also we have to approach to the another way to secure the ethanol more stably in domestic or in the Asian region. This is my lesson learned right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing real insights from real projects. You know, the devil is in the details, and that's what can make a project very successful. We talked a lot about the feedstock, and it was mentioned earlier today that the value of sustainable aviation fuel comes from the certificate. And Xiaohui, you're the one who highlighted it. And in order to get that certificate, it starts at feedstock. It's the entire value chain that has to be covered. So, Andy, if you could share from an off-taker perspective, how important is this CORSIA certificate and the impact on feedstock collection and so on?
Right, sure. So I think the certification itself as a process, many people underestimate it, but it is actually the core of the entire sustainability of the supply chain, right? We have product quality for fuel quality. But similarly, for sustainability, we have this certification process that is undergone to give assurance to the end user of the fuel that it is sustainably produced. There's no fudging in between. There's no forgery of the sustainability attributes that's claimed on the fuel itself. So the certification process is the core of the entire thing. That's one. Internationally recognized certification is the way to access the market. As you can see, there is RED certification for ISCC RED, there is ISCC CORSIA, and there are other certifications available. But so far for now, the only one that's internationally recognized by the members of ICAO is CORSIA. So if the Vietnamese producers are intending for their feedstock to qualify to our international market, CORSIA certification is actually key. If not, you will always be tied to one market's access, which is basically RED. And reiterating the point that Xiao Hui made in the earlier panel, if there is cross-compliance or there's mutual recognition of RED and CORSIA, that would definitely help the world move towards a more harmonized space whereby feedstocks are no longer tied to a particular certification pathway. It allows sharing, it allows a lot more flexibilities to the supply chain to be able to flex and move SAF adoption going forward.
Thank you, and I think it's especially important when we look at the aviation development in Asia Pacific. It's in the future 40% of the global demand, and the one certification that is recognized in this region is CORSIA, so that's the importance. We talked a lot from the off-taker perspective, the producer perspective. Mr. Haiyan, could you share with us from a regulatory ministry perspective, what's your engagement on SAF, and how can we, what are you doing to ensure the availability of the feedstock and the discussion on the competition with potential other usage?
Trong việc sử dụng SAF. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Helen, and the organizers for giving me this opportunity for me to speak on behalf of the regulators. So I'm honored to participate and discuss in this panel discussion. Your question is a great one, and we have heard a lot from previous speakers. For a producer to be viable, they need to secure a sustainable supply of feedstock. And at the moment, as you are aware, the technologies used for SAF production offers to us a number of technologies which require different types of feedstock. And for Vietnam, we see that the most common feedstocks are fish fats or animal fats and biomasses, rice husk, bagases or gas, which can be used to produce a SAF. And these feedstocks, I mean, each type of feedstock is, different, because for Vietnam, like animal fats, we need to collect, we need to organize the collection in a proper manner to ensure quality, which is not yet well organized. So collecting these feedstock is not a simple process for the producers in Vietnam, because the feedstock supply needs to be organized well, which also requires the support or policies or even regulations by the regulator to control and to manage this system mechanism. So collection, procurement of the feedstocks will be driven by reasonable pricing and collection and good collection systems and methods. That's why just procuring feedstock is a significant area already for producers of SAF. Biomass or wastes domestic wastes, for example, is available in the market in the country, which can be used for self-production for the time being under HEFA technology. So we can see there is a wide range of organic waste that can be used for self-production, which is available or abundant that could be used. But how to use them in an effective manner, that needs to be explored. And between now and 2030, 2 plants are now being constructed. Petrolimex with HEFA technology. PBN is also constructing a HEFA technology plant. So I think that with these 2 plants, what we need to think about is to ensure sufficient supply of feedstock for production between now and up to 2030. And then hydrogen and CO2 for self-production is another option. And there are potentials in Vietnam for hydrogen and CO2 used as the materials, the inputs for self-production. So if you use the renewable byproducts, CO2 and hydrogens for self-production, it is a potential solution for us. So even though there are challenges, so we see that between now and 2030, we are gearing our corporates towards exploring various options using various technologies so that they can utilize the available feedstocks in Vietnam to produce SAF at reasonable costs. And also, we need to develop and organize the feedstock supply in Vietnam as well. And for the time being, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, as the regulator, has received not only 1 or 2 proposals for SAF production. So we have received proposals not just from Petrolimex and PVN or BSR. We have also received other suggestions and proposals.
Thì chúng tôi cũng nhận được những cái đề xuất.
So we have received proposals on investments for self-production from other businesses, and some of them have proposed use other technologies for self-production. And like our colleague from, I mean the gentleman from Japan said, the technology will also has to consider the availability of the right feedstock.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. We'll share the mic, no problem. It's a community approach to sustainable aviation fuel. We talked a lot about the feedstock, and actually we also addressed the second topic that I was suggesting for this panel, which is the supply chain and the complexity. It can be a cost burden. It can be also a key success factor for a project. So allow me, given the time that we have remaining on this panel, I'd like to focus more on the call for action. What are the enablers? So there are many projects announced in the world and a lot in ASEAN. Last time I checked our tracker, we have over 70 projects announced. Now, not all these projects in ASEAN announced will become reality. The fail rate going from an idea to an actual FID, final investment decision, is quite high. So because it's difficult, there are a few challenges to move from project idea to a proper feasibility study and final investment decision. The question is then, how do we accelerate the how do we accelerate transforming those projects into real production plants? And how can we reinforce their business case so that we attract the investors with the conundrum of the airlines willing to decarbonize, but with the price of SAF being a hurdle, and on the other end, the project owners that need long-term perspective in order to commit such large investment. So if you allow me, Mr. Thuk, I'll start with you. What are the policies or the mechanism, the support mechanism that you think would be helpful or needed to facilitate investment in the projects and to bring the projects to FID with a long-term commercial viability?
Well, khả năng khả thi về mặt thương mại. Well, that's a really good question for BSR. For BSR, we had a series of discussions before we proceed to the last stage. We discuss a lot with the authorities. We understand that speed is very important because technology may evolve very fast and we may miss the opportunity. So from our own experience, we've identified certain enablers. For example, in Vietnam, to implement a project like this, we have several stages from pre-feasibility to feasibility study to front-end engineering design, FEED, and then detailed design. And we have proposed for a streamlined process. So we started with a feasibility study, and then we had FEED and EPC all together. We combine these two stages together. It's like a streamlined process, and we work directly with the potential providers of services or contractors. So instead of having a lengthy process for procurement, so we need to an important enabling mechanism is streamlining of procedures. And another enabler have to do with the set of the roadmap or the blueprint set by the government regarding the blending of SAF and gasoline, because blending mandates are critical to the success of project like this in Vietnam. And we've said that SAF is like a chicken and egg problem. Investors may want to have certainty about demand by waiting for the mandates, for the blending mandates, while we also want to have investment before we make it mandatory. So a fast track or streamlined procedures is one of the important enablers. Another is the special mechanism. So we are making proposal to the Vietnamese authorities so that we can shorten the lengthy process for project formulation and then planning and designing for to procurement. Before the FS study, we are required to have the master plan with the ratio of 1:25, and we are asking for the exemption of that. We have making proposal regarding green financing for project of a longer term horizon with lower or more affordable interests. We also think that we need corporate tax income incentives to encourage more investments in SAF production as well as in collection of feedstock. Currently, we have a 4 years tax holiday as an incentive, and then 50 100% reduction of tax payable in the following 5 years. So this is a very important tax incentive. We have also proposed other incentive, for example, waiver of land rental or water service rental, as well as asking for the support from the government authorities in site clearance. So, I mean, a mix of measures will be required to enable the project, to turn the project from idea to actual operation. And we also believe that cooperation, partnership with global partners with strong technology and expertise will be very beneficial. So these are some enablers viewed from the company perspective.
Thank you very much for sharing. I would like to ask Vinit, you have had the chance to look at projects in many different emerging markets. So like Vietnam is starting that journey towards sustainable aviation fuel. So from your experience, what are the primary risks that you see, and what are the type of measures that could help de-risk a project and the investment for the investors?
Sure. Yes, LanzaTech and LanzaJet, we have been developing a lot of, I'm audible? Yeah. So we have been developing a lot of projects, and right now there are more than 7 projects which are in the FEED stage and heading towards FID. And in fact, earlier I forgot to mention that we are the only company in the world to have an integrated SAF plant which has commercially made jet fuel from any alcohol. And so how, given in our experience, like how we develop these projects, collaboration is the key. Someone mentioned it before the lunch session also, that, and in our case also, there has to be a collaboration amongst, SAF is something, which no one alone can do, because given the nature it is, it's not only about producing, it's also about assuring an offtake, and also at the same time, you have to map the entire life cycle analysis, right? So we have been developing projects wherein, we partner with, in some cases, we are taking the lead and bringing the project to FID stage, which involves a lot of pre-FID work, like something what you were saying, sir. And apart from that, you need a financial institution along by your side, like airlines, the OEMs, right? Everybody needs to be there. And so primarily, we feel that today the technology is already there. Like HEFA is a proven technology which has been there. Of course, feedstocks are there to satiate initial 2 to 3%, but going beyond, then you have other technologies like alcohol to jet. The biggest concern is the commercial risk, and if I have to name 3, that comes first is the feedstock security. Any project developer, he'll need to have a sustained supply of the feedstock, and which is why I say a refiner, it's very easier to make ethanol because you already produce these off gases, the steel mill players, right? Or a power plant. So someone who has an assured feedstock, that's the first risk is taken care. Second is, of course, the offtake guarantees, and what offtake brings in, it sends a demand signal. It also sends a sense of assurance amongst the lenders, the financiers. Yes, now my a product is there. Sorry, someone is there to buy that, and obviously when you have offtake and the offtake agreements, so you also take care of the pricing part, which again helps in closing the business case, because we often forget that while technology plays a crucial part, but the decisions are always made on the basis of a business case, right? And last is, of course, the financing and the policy risk. Still, as you were mentioning, sir, a lot of clarity is not there across the globe. Everyone talks about the same hurdle rates, but tomorrow, if you look at the sustainable projects, I'm sure the hurdle needs to be dropped down. And how that can be done, or the enablers, again, the mandate has to be there. We have an ethanol success story in India. Today, we are more than 22% blending in ethanol, and we're heading towards 30% in next 2 years. And why that was made possible, it was only because of the mandates. We have a history of doing the renewable, 50% of the renewable energy, I think, in our country comes. Again, it was because the mandate was there. And once you have a mandate, so producers will make and the off-takers will buy. Second is, of course, there need to be a viability gap funding incentive, or incentive, a support towards the capital risk, because these are SAF, unlike ethanol, be it HEFA or A2J, they are capital intensive projects. Of course, not as high as refineries, but these are, So if a viability gap funding can be provided, and that is the model how, things are progressing elsewhere. And apart from that also comes a financial incentive. It could be in terms of a tax credit incentive, like what's happening in US. They're providing incentive of 1.2 to 1.75 USD per gallon of SAF being produced, depending upon the carbon intensity. Or it could be something what UK is adopting, a premium price, right? So UK has been a very attractive market, if anyone wants to follow. They even have a mandate. Then they even have a sub-mandate for PTL technologies along with the premium buyout price, So for any project developers, they should be there. This often helps. But last but not least, what needs to be there is actually a pre-FID funding support, which I see it's there in UK, it's there in Japan, it's there in Australia, it's there in Brazil. We are talking about in India. And why we need that? Because, as sir, you rightly explained, from a concept to stage of first FID and then commissioning, there are a lot of activities which need to be done, right? A project developer, he needs to engage an engineering consultant. He needs to take a technology package, and that entails some amount of investments, So if government can support with that funding, UK government last year, they came out with 63 million of pre-FID funding. And they shortlisted, I think, 16 or 17 projects, which were advanced SAF projects, wherein they, luckily, there were 2 projects in UK, a Speedbird being developed by LanzaJet. We are fronting that till FID, and then we'll call for investors. Second is the project Dragon, which is being fronted by LanzaTech, and both are in FEED stage right now. So you need some finance support from the government to bring a project from a concept stage to stage of where you can make a call for FID now. So if that support is given, I'm sure any project will fly.
Thank you for sharing. Please.
Sorry, Helen. I just want to chime in because I think one of the things as a project developer, right, they are looking for policy certainty. That is very, very important to them. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm putting metal on the ground, I'm taking risks, I'm taking loans to go and build something. I want to know that in 10 years' time, this demand for it or this policy they set is not going to go away. So that's one. But over and beyond that, I think policy harmonization across the region can also help spread the risk. Keep in mind that ASEAN is not, is Europe, EU in a sense, but it's over a much more concentrated space. We are all different countries, but if we are all taking a harmonized approach, a common approach of increasing SAF uptake via targets or mandates, that will also help de-risk a project. It's not just a burden on one country alone, but when the project developer look at it, they look at it across the region, right? My production is not tied to one geography. My production is tied to the region. I think Subhash mentioned it earlier in his presentation. I hope that didn't go away and got unnoticed.
No, thank you for sharing. Indeed, as I said in introduction, when we look at the SAF potential, production potential in Vietnam, we are talking not just about domestic needs. We are obviously looking at export market because the potential production exceeds the short-term or mid-term needs. So, and that's where it's an economic opportunity, but where harmonization and certification, common certification standards are so key. Actually, that allows me to tie back to Misaki-san. So when we build the business case, I mean, you have a refinery running. How important is that export market to justify and reinforce the viability of the business case?
Yeah, actually, Taiyo Oil is also watching about the export market. To be honest, Taiyo has too big capability to produce SAF, more than our outlet market. So we are planning to 80% of the SAF production goes to outside of the region, outside of Japan. And this is a necessary stage to adopt the SAF, because our final goal should be the carbon net zero. So if we limit our production in a earlier stage, the policymaker cannot expect to raise more for the mandate or the regulation. So that's why now Japanese government is supporting the capex subsidy big enough, because of the one reason is a diversify of the resources. Japan doesn't have our energy resources. That's why every resource is coming from outside of the country. So if rely on the HEFA too much, it's going to be very risk for the energy security point of view. But that's why the government want to subsidize for the E2J at the same time. Even though E2J is not comes online on the commercial basis, but at that time, government already decided to support the E2J to split the energy security. Then the export, it should be necessary because of the airline is always saying about the cost, of course. It's very expensive. This how it should be. That's why they want to limit about the mandate. But luckily, they don't have any off-take mandate. Japan got production mandate, so producer has to supply. This is the mandate. But airlines still want to keep the small starter basis. So they don't want to off-take the stuff if the price is too high. So it's a very difficult to compromise each other. But of course, the government will set some national policy to expand the SAF business in Japan. So if not so many refiners try to establish the SAF plant, the government cannot make a better policy to approach to the carbon net zero. So yeah, I think the start from the export policy, it should be the necessary stage to go up or raise the mandate volume.
Thank you.
Well, can I just chime in again? A very valid point which you raised, and we heard in the previous session also. And trust me, it's the same issue with the Indian market. A lot of airliners, you talk about SAF, they'll push you away. It took us almost 2.5 years to bring them to table. Let's do it. But you know, I think one point, and it's a fact which we often overlooked. Nobody is asking for 100% blending. We're just starting with 1%, 2%, and at max 5% by 2030, at least in the Asian world, right? And so the price which they scare you with, that's not the actual price. The price, it's gonna be 0.05 into X and plus the point of the jet, you know. So which is a minuscule price hike, and that can often be passed to customers. And interestingly, I was going through an article last year. There was a study done in Singapore, you know. So my I think fellow panelists from Singapore must be knowing that the cost of a ticket at 1% blending from Singapore to Tokyo will only be a $6 increment, you know. And Singapore to London, it will be around $30. Now, a lot of time we see surge pricing happening in the airline tickets, you know. So such pricing can easily be passed on. That's my, you know, that's my two advice.
We don't have an airline on the panel. I think that would be a very interesting discussion to have with Marty customers. But actually, this pooling of demand is a bit what Singapore has taken as an approach. Andy, can you share a bit more, because it's not a mandate, it's a different way that Singapore has taken to try to create that economic certainty on the offtake side to support project development in the region?
Yeah, thanks. I think what Singapore is trying to do and recognizing that it is putting its feet out, right, being the first mover on this, we want to take a very pragmatic approach to the entire demand signaling. We have seen that mandates can come back very strongly, especially on the person who the mandate is actually enforced on. So this target and this levy approach that SAFCO is wrong, that Singapore is taking and mandating SAFCO to execute, is one that we are going to test the water and find a way forward for the aviation industry in ASEAN. That's one. Secondly, how the the aggregation of demand, it actually helps the smaller players, like what Xiao Hui during the other panel has mentioned. We are helping people take away this additional cost. I need a sustainability office, or I need a procurement office just to do SAF, or I need someone that has this specialized knowledge. No, you don't need to do that. Come on board, join us, and then we'll do all this procurement together with a base load large enough to attract suppliers to come on, a bid for the tender, and then get this thing going. Slowly and slowly, we'll build this up, the volume, to large enough a demand that there's this sustained role of demand volume that can attract project developers to go and build more projects.
Thank you. So, Mr. Haiyan, we heard a lot of ideas on how to, and experience and feedback from players from the industry, from pre-FID support, support to offtake agreements, export market development, feedstock securitization. Could you share any update on the ongoing interministerial discussions that aim at establishing the most optimal supply chain and framework for Japan to develop the SAF?
Well, when it comes to a mechanism, an optimal mechanism, first we have looked at the needed infrastructures for the entire supply chain, from production to usage of the product. For SAF and Jet A1, our distribution system has now provided the needed services through the supply chain. So we are now consuming what we produce, and the infrastructure is still there, is already there to receive and to distribute and use the SAF. For Vietnam, in recent period, we have had discussions among the regulators. And from the ministry's perspective, we actually have been approaching SAF fairly quickly, because aviation may be one of the industries that approach to the latest developments in the global environment the fastest among other industries. So SAF story has been looked at from the perspective of regulators, how we can support the development, production, and uptake of SAF. And at the Ministry of in our ministries, Ministry of Construction has been assigned to develop the master plan, and they issued a decision on the directions and strategies for developing SAF plans. And in that master plan, it is actually an open blueprint, and we do not limit the development. We have received proposals for developments from a number of proposing corporates, not just from the petrolimics and PVN. We have included in the shortlists some SAF proposals, but we keep our blueprint open. We do not limit or restrict the interest to be expressed on developing SAF, and we also identify the potential regions or provinces for developments. In Vietnam, we mainly approach our hubs in three regions: the north, the center, and the south, and we identify the potential sites in each of the regions. So our approach, our position among the ministries is to keep it open and enabling and encouraging the stakeholders to participate.
Thank you very much for sharing. I'm looking at the time, and unfortunately we could go on for 4 hours, but we will have to come to a conclusion. Not sure it's a conclusion, actually. I would say it's the beginning of a journey. Vietnam is very well positioned to become a powerhouse of sustainable aviation fuel for ASEAN and for the rest of the world. And it's very encouraging to see all the efforts put together and this cross-ministerial collaboration. I'd like to thank my dear panelists for your contribution. If there is one last word you would like to share, feel free. Is there anything you would like to say to conclude? No?
I learned about the one thing in our morning session, and one friend said, let's work together in ASEAN. Please involve me in Japan as well. But anyway, to work, thank you. To work together, it means very important because if Singapore moving ahead, if Japan moving ahead, maybe national flag, national airport airlines will have some disadvantage to be a cost center first. So that's why the move together should be very necessary to adapt the SAF in global stage. So yeah, this is my message.
Vietnam and ASEAN and friends. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much.
Vâng ạ, xin được cảm ơn các diễn giả của chúng ta đã kết.
Thank you very much for the final panel discussion in the workshop today. Ladies and gentlemen, after one hard working day, we have come to an end of our workshop. We have had quite useful discussions, presentations, and insights into the topic of sustainable aviation fuels. The discussions have also opened up to further collaboration opportunities in the future. So we thank you very much for your inputs and participation. And to conclude our event today, we would like to invite Mr. Ta Kang Hung, Deputy Director General of Science and Technology, Environment and Construction Materials Department of Ministry of Construction, with closing remarks.
Distinguished guests, we've had a very fruitful working day with a lot of discussion and insight share. Our international conference on SAF has come to an end. On behalf of Ministry of Construction, I would like to express our sincere thanks to the organizer, to the speakers, panelists, facilitators, and participants for your effort and participation. We would like to thank especially the ACST and the CGF, APSAC, and Petrolimics for supporting the organization of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a lot of interesting presentation and discussions regarding the trends of SAF developments, policy frameworks and market developments. We had a lot of useful exchanges of experience regarding a policy mechanism that enable SAF implementation. We have shed light into different mechanisms and assessments, including the availability of feedstock, the readiness of infrastructure, the enablers, policy enablers. I believe that the experience and insights shared today have demonstrated that SAF requires the concerted efforts of various stakeholders, not just the aviation industry. SAF is emerging as a critical solution for carbon emission in aviation industry. It is also an opportunity for better competitiveness, for better economic growth, development and integration. But it also poses challenges when it comes to infrastructure, policy mechanism, especially in lowering the cost, making it more affordable, more available. There are no model, SAF development model that fits all the countries, no one-size-fits-all model. And experience has shown that SAF mechanism should be tailored to national circumstances and priorities, as well as the capabilities of the industry. We believe that the insights and experience shared today will be very helpful for Vietnam in designing our policy framework, strengthening our implementation capabilities. We look forward to further collaboration with you, especially in our efforts to design an enabling policy framework for SAF ecosystem in Vietnam. This also provides a networking opportunity, and we believe that the outcomes of the conference plays a very important role in promoting the development of SAF ecosystem in Vietnam, in promoting green transformation of the aviation industry in the region and at the global level. We would like to thank all of you for your active participation. May I wish all of you success, happiness, and good health. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Tạ Quang Hưng. Ladies and gentlemen, so we have covered every item on the agenda, and on behalf of the organizer, we would like to thank all of you who you have made our conference to be a great success. And we hope that the momentum from the conference will continue to grow in our future efforts. Thank you.